observations or comments. So
all right, let's go, Andrew.
All right, super. So this is me. The white paper was written between myself and Will Easton, who's a workplace experience designer. I work more in the collaboration and digital working space, where I typically advise governments, multinationals on, I guess, less crap ways of work, trying to move away from traditional methods more collaborative, visible, such as more knowledge sharing, more use of things like teams, and also how we can actually use the technology to meet the needs of a team or a department or an organization, rather than just being the recipient of the relentless onslaught of technology. And so this white paper came about on the back of, what are people doing? Are organizations trying to actually create a better experience? And if they are, what is it they're doing? Why are they doing it? What do their people think? So we got 19 respondents, including Unilever, GE, Bayer, New South Wales Health Department in Australia, and Qantas, the ICC in The Hague, and Bose. So a number of these, 7 of the organizations are 25,000 plus employees. 8 sectors, so quite a widespread group, but also it wasn't a survey. It wasn't a, do you do this? Yes, no. It was, tell me your stories. How do you do this? What's your approach to this? What's your feedback on this? So I really wanted to uncover what the stories were and interpret this into something a little bit more practical. And I think one of the narratives that came out very quickly was that organizations want, and employees, both flexibility and consistency, but it's perceived as a bit of a paradox that we can't have both. So we tend to choose one or the other, that we feel that flexibility is just a little bit of a free-for-all. So for consistency, we tend to drive to the return to office mandates, because at least everyone's in the same place at the same time. But it doesn't have to be that way. And in fact, that's incredibly unpopular as well. And not just with employees, but managers too. So let's start with the bad. What are people doing poorly at? And top of the bill, lack of digital collaboration skills. Big issue that really there's a struggle to use tools like Microsoft 365 and Teams specifically effectively. We just don't have the ability to really work properly in channels. We have the technology, but not necessarily the skills to use it. Hybrid meetings just were found to not work. A combination of the technology, but also facilitation skills that are lacking. The fact that office days are just mandated arbitrarily without real purpose. It's a waste of time for a lot of people unless there's intentional collaboration, which I'm sure a lot of you appreciate. There's no point going to the office if you're just sat on Zoom or Teams calls all day. Poor communication practices, really, really important that if we have people that are predominantly remote, they become less visible and are contacted less frequently. So, communication becomes really key. And lastly, no clear hybrid work goals. So no intentional goals for hybrid work, such as retention and attraction. It could be around well-being. It could be around engagement. There's a wealth of potential goals that aren't really explored. And maybe this is a question for everybody here. Do you feel that you have some goals for hybrid work, or is it something that's just sort of evolved post-pandemic? And is there somebody responsible? Is there somebody who actually owns this as a thing that maybe wants to drive change? I'd love to just get a sense of, is there any sort of objective around this and any desire to do something about it?
All right.
And apologies to anybody if they've got hands up or anything.
Yeah, anybody wants to, let's start in Switzerland. Gerard?
Yes, sure. I would say I would support what you have said, right? What I have seen in one large multinational is a vague mandatory edict, but without that specific purpose. So the objective that was stated is essentially to protect collaboration and culture, but with no specific action.
Right. Interesting. And it's, I think, often ignored that you can have a good culture digitally as well as face-to-face. I mean, I've experienced some terrible inductions where I've been in the office and not spoken to anyone, not seen anyone. I've just been told to browse the internet or read policies, and we can have poor cultural practices in the office and remotely. So It's interesting how we tend to.
This point was specifically made also for onboarding younger employees and generation and supporting that process of new employees versus long-term ones.
Yeah, and I totally understand that, and I think actually that's where there is value in having people in the office. I mean, but again, it comes down to intentionality, I suppose. It's like that's great, but we don't have to be in the office all the time, every day, for new people to onboard. And I think that's the problem.
So briefly, Paul, I don't want to derail you too much, Andrew, but curious to hear your perspective as well, Paul.
Yeah, just what Gerard said was very interesting as well. I think I've heard that with younger employees or with sales teams that are coming together. And I wanted to also just touch on the attraction side. Sometimes, depending on where you are, these are large companies. So if you have smaller companies, you may not be able to attract the talent that you want without being remote. And that then starts to shrink your base of potential employees.
100%. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, I don't know exactly where everyone here is, but I'm assuming that many of you work in a hybrid setup with, maybe some of you are fully remote, and it's. Do any of you experience a sort of return to office mandates at the moment? Is that something that is enforced on you in your organizations, or are you in largely a sort of more autonomous, flexible hybrid way of work?
So let's do Thomas and then Chris and then back to you, Andrew. Okay, so Thomas and Hamburg first.
My hand was already up before the last question. Sorry about that.
It's all good.
No, I was just going to say, I used to be Mr. Hybrid in my old job. I'm not yet in the new job, but I'm trying to make my way. I always said being good as a hybrid employer is a chance. The opposite is a risk. But you need to look a bit deeper than the obvious. Like you said, the young people are going to want to work remotely, and we found out it's not always the case, because the young people tend to have small apartments and they like a good office, whereas us silverback managers have our nice home we can work from on the lakeside, and we don't necessarily go to the office all the time. So it's a bit more. You need to dig a little bit deeper.
Yes, for sure. And to your point as well.
All right, let's go to Chris and then back to you.
Yeah, I was just going to chime in with regards to so full disclosure, we work for a fully remote company. We've worked on the principle that if anyone is remote in any part of their capacity, you need to act like a remote company. I don't think you can ever have that sort of try and enforce both things at the same time. But also, I'm just wondering the impact of the current job climate. I'm not sure so many people can be so choosy to say, yes, they'd love to work from home and they want to have 4-day weeks and gift cards and everything else, but the job climate's pretty tough. So should we not just say, hey, they just have to suck it up, and we want them in the office, and then they're in the office? I mean, I'll just want to be a bit devil's advocate on that one.
Yeah, and that's it. I mean, and there's pros and cons for both. I mean, to the previous comment about more sort of mature employees tend to have better working from home options, but also more mature employees tend to have networks. They have that support network, whereas younger employees often don't. And how do you actually provide that opportunity to them when maybe they're not in the office so much? So, the office definitely has roles, depending on where you are in your career. And this, I'll sort of shift on through the slides so we don't run out of time. But these issues come up. And so I'll just go back to the last slide as well. Sorry, that we did have an example, a quote here from one of the respondents around arbitrary days in the office, but it doesn't really help when meetings can be held not on site, or they're remote when you're on site. So you kind of ruin the remote work system. Potentially, then you have more meetings when you're back at home rather than in the office. So again, there's issues around how do we actually structure it in a way that people get the best use of their time. So what are we doing well at? This is, I think, from across, sort of trying to generalize the responses, we're starting to recognize that hybrid work is more about location. We're looking at our digital spaces and indeed time, how we use time, and it doesn't have to be about working at the same place at the same time. And a number of teams are becoming more autonomous. They are encouraging flexible ways of work by designing their own work agreements. And the office, some organizations are seeing it as a place for intentional activities, and they are being quite smart about how they do this, such as offering mentoring opportunities with senior leaders by saying that on these specific days, you can book in time to meet up with leaders and you can spend some time with them in the office. So it encourages people in some networking activities and team building. So they are looking at just beyond the standard day-to-day work and meetings and doing stuff. A number of organizations are exploring asynchronous work. So they are having an impact of reducing meetings, but also building a more inclusive environment, because meetings are hard, and an asynchronous meeting is it's the same experience for everybody. Whereas if some people are in the office and some people are remote, the meeting experience is quite inconsistent. And lastly, the technology seems largely fit for purpose. Like the tools are actually acknowledged as well suited. It's the behaviors that are missing. It's how do we actually use them appropriately. And so one of the responses, the quote here, was that onboarding training sessions on how to use the digital workplace tools and some norms around collaboration are very valuable. And that's something that I don't see that many organizations doing. So, but it's good to see that where they do it, it is actually well received. And, I don't really want to go down the rabbit hole of, is Teams good? Is it, is it people generally, it's hard to get people to use it well because people are creatures of habit. So we tend to default to the norms of Outlook and maybe using chat rather than channels. So it becomes difficult to really get people using Teams very well without some more labor-intensive training. I'll pause it there if anyone has any comments to that or anything that they chimes with them or what they see they're doing well at.
Yes, let's go to Julian, also in Toronto.
Yeah, and thanks, Andrew. This is super helpful. A question, when you're talking to these folks, do you have a sense of sort of how standardized HR is in this? Because that's sort of been my experience a bit, is that a big variance is HR, so there's kind of a continuum of non-existent to very engaged. And even sometimes the very engaged is, to be frank, problematic because it's no, it's a brilliant question, because I was having this conversation just earlier today that HR doesn't seem to be leading this. HR traditionally has an enablement function and a risk management function and a business operations function, and typically no, I don't see HR involved a lot. Maybe more sort of above that, sort of at a sort of C-suite level, or if there are specific cultural roles. A lot of workplace, like there's a lot more focus on workplace experience now, and I think that's where there's a lot more interest that's maybe taking over the typical HR role in terms of this ways of work sort of approach. But I'd love to see HR having a more proactive, creative slant, rather than going, well, we just make sure we can work, people don't do the wrong thing, and we're not breaking any rules. But actually, can we push things a bit? Can we start to transform? And learning development, I think, are starting to take a bit more of a sort of a prominent role in this too. Does anybody else see HR as being? This is quite a fascinating area. Who really cares about this space to do something about it?
Let's go to Casper, our mutual friend in the Netherlands.
Aha. Hello, Casper.
Let's see which button. I think he pressed the mute button. Or
maybe he's just he's now realized it's me, and he's.
I hope you can hear me now.
Now we
can.
Yes. Okay. Great. Hello, guys. Good to see you again. So Andrew, you're just saying about HR not being involved. That's not how it functions within my company, because like 4 years ago, HR merged with digital workplace and facilities. So everything around the employee is now clustered in one department and has one seat at the table in the board of directors. So actually HR is now driving actually this change and actually facilitating users to, well, be autonomous. Also now with the big changes with AI coming up. So this is going back to the office, but actually there's a bigger wave heading our way, especially if you're in knowledge management. And that's how to implement AI in your day-to-day work as an employee. And then choosing which location to work from as well, right? So it's a complex issue with multiple facets, and that's actually exactly why this department was created to integrate and make decisions that actually reflect in your digital workplace, in your physical workplace, but also in the way we set up work, the way people are managed, and also well rewarded for their work. And that should go hand in hand. At least I see a lot of benefits of combining all those functions in one big department, because then you can focus on the employee as an entity.
100%. No, I'm so glad you say that, because it's something I don't see very often. So this is great that actually someone has recognized that we need to bring HR and facilities and technology together and look at overall the whole picture, because effectively this is just work. It's not like it's technology versus office versus culture. It's all one thing. So that's brilliant to hear.
All right, let's go to, I don't know where in the world you are, Sarge, walking around, a little bit cautious. Let's see how this goes.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm actually outside. Just a quick follow-up. I'm actually also part of the Apache Software Foundation, which is an open source foundation. And because of the, it's mostly volunteers from all around the world. And the way they will have to work, they don't really have a choice, is to be asynchronous. And there's been a lot of learnings over the years, and it works pretty well. And one of the things is that they have this basis that no decision can happen in a meeting. It can only happen in asynchronous communications, so that everybody gets a say. And decisions have times like 72 hours to be approved or removed. And what I found is that once people start working that way, they quickly become much more communicative, and overall inclusion improved. And some companies that have participated in these open source groups have actually adopted some of these practices based on that. So I just wanted to chime in with that.
Fabulous. I'm so glad to hear that. And I guess, does it initially slow things down a bit? Obviously, you have to create more written content, but do you find that you can get decisions a bit faster because you've got more sort of rich content to work with, more context from, as opposed to other traditional methods?
All right. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Do you have more slide for you?
I do. Yeah. I will crack on through these. So, following on from what we do well, what do we want to do? What do people actually want to see more of? Improve hybrid meetings is a big issue, in terms of investing in better meeting technology, perhaps, where you've got that sort of the bad experience in the office, but also the managers, how they can be more inclusive when some people are dialing in remote. And, some have policies that if there's one person that's remote, then the facilitator of the meeting has to be remote as well. So sort of things that sort of shift our behaviors a bit. Other things that making office time more purposeful. It's really, really important. A lot of people want to shift from mandates to more intentional in-person time. So we'll go into the office when we need to, rather than when we just go in because that's just the default. Strengthen communication and visibility. So we've got more honest, open updates on work availability, our activities, where we are, who we're seeing. And to Casper's point about AI, this becomes really, really useful. Once you've got more visibility of what we're doing, it then becomes a lot easier to then get a sense of where we need to be, what are our rhythms, and how technology can help align us a lot better. Develop clear hybrid goals, so moving away from tracking hours and focusing on measuring impact and outcomes.
and closing the digital skills gap. So more training on how to use tools effectively, particularly there's a typo there, but what tool when at the end. And this last little statement here on the right, that employees need both formal and informal communication. And I think an issue if we've got largely remote people is that the back channel communication methods cannot exist, or can be hard to access, whereas in the office you've got the corridor, you've got the time before and after a meeting where you have a nice little chat. When you don't have access to that, it can really be it can drive loss of connection, but also it's not great for well-being, it's not great for development. So it's understanding that we need both formal and informal communication. And so following from this, I mean, really the 5 things I think that come out strongly to focus on if we want to improve the employee experience is that we create consistent team agreements. So expectations there around availability, preferred tools, meeting norms, boundaries between work and personal time. We improve our meetings to make them more inclusive, that they're more, if we're having a meeting, it's conversational, and if it's not, then this should be an asynchronous meeting. We build digital fluency, so we're getting more out of teams, specifically how to use channels to work more visibly and to narrate what we're doing, to make visibility and recognition a priority. So part of this is also that managers need to be aware that they have to recognize contributions, that they need to be listening, they need to be recognizing people's contribution within team and enterprise tools, and that we need to invest in relationships and connection, that there are, as I mentioned, informal and informal channels, and that there are processes for check-ins, for mentoring, for getting people together, for team building activities where we might not necessarily have those if our schedules are a little spread. And I'll close up on this so we can maybe have a quick chat at the end. But themes underpinned by trust. Obviously, this is so important. If there's not a sense of trust, it's really hard to get the visibility, to get that sort of the knowledge and practices you need out in the open that really help hybrid work thrive. And communication is a big part of this. The digital skills that we're lacking, and lastly, one size does not fit all. It's really hard to create a consistent set of expectations for work across the entire organization. And the organizations that are finding hybrids working well, and I know that I think Casper and Rubberbank is one that does have a big role of team charters and team agreements, and that's where there is more empowerment to make our own choices. And I will just lastly share you, this is something that I use to help teams design how they want to work. We start off with some areas that maybe we want to improve. There's a huge amount, there's a lot of categories here, but we can try and focus in, is there one of these that's important, or several of these? And then it's giving teams the tools. I've got some playing cards that allow teams, whether they sit down in a room or whether they do it virtually in a board, but to start to pick specific activities that they want and where they want to have them. So these are about where we work, how we use the technology to really empower teams, but also to give them some structure. There are all of these cards have come out of the white paper. So these are all things that organizations are doing and doing well. And it's just a way of distilling that into something that is practical to sort of enable change at a team level. So
super interesting.
And that's that. I will stop sharing, and there's my details there, but I'm sure Janus can.
Your focus on the digital collaboration skills, which I'm guessing is very, very high in this group of first movers and innovators. But I was reminded of it just earlier this week when I was in Copenhagen in a government digital leaders group. And we talked again about AI and ChatGPT and LLMs and how that can be produced. And then one lady raised her hand who's been going to all the previous meetings and asked, can you just tell me what is a prompt? And I was happy that there is evidently the psychological safety in the room that she had the courage to ask this. But it was also for me an eye-opening reminder that even among digital leaders, sometimes things move so fast and people are so busy in their corners of working with all these very, very meaningful things like diversity, inclusion, and whatever it is, huge, complex websites or intranets, and then, all right, what's the prompt? And I think this, for me, really meant, that it resonated when you talked about, this whole lack of digital collaboration skills, which we've also covered in previous calls here, and how we could all benefit from sometimes taking half an hour or a little bit longer to get better at using these tools that we use day in and day out. So a few other comments before I let you talk again, Andrew. Let's hear it from Montreal, Ivo, and then Matthias near Oslo, and then back to you.
Thanks. I think this is also a great business opportunity. And we turn it into one. We're a digital product agency from Toronto. I'm based in Montreal, so I'm fully remote. But the office in Toronto is actually, we call it a productive space. It's a separate business. So not only do we work hybrid there, we allow other agencies to work hybrid there, and they pay for that. They rent the space. So it's also a fantastic business opportunity to take it to the next level. And then the other thing is also, what I've noticed over the last 4 years is that, doing a lot of workshopping. I used to be back in Amsterdam, and it's all like in the room and all cozy and nice, and everybody's like always doing their stuff. Dutch people are very active. Different in Canada, different in Montreal, but remotely, people all turn a little bit Dutch. So they tend to be less scared to say things, do things when we're fig jamming or doing something. So that's also just an observation I wanted to share.
It's interesting, people turning a little bit Dutch. That's a good one. Let's go to near Oslo, Matthias, and then back to you, Andrew, to wrap it up.
Yeah, no, I think the thing you pointed out about informal time is really, really important, and also back channels. And what I have experienced is that, back channels are often frowned upon because back channel decisions are not good, but back channel conversations are very important. And I think it's really important also in this remote space to allow people to have a space where they can actually spend time on asking the necessary background questions or tell about their current personal situation, so that people get a context about this person and the space they're in.
That's a great point.
Absolutely.
And then over to you, Andrew.
Excellent. Thank you. No, I appreciate all your input. I'm going back to Matthias's point about back channels, I think it is underappreciated, and the importance, not just for decision making, but also for well-being and connection. But a big issue is that there is a lack of connection, and this is having a huge impact on mental health for those that are. You still might be going to the office, but if you still haven't got those relationships with people in the office, it's really hard to then further your career and to become a. I guess have that support network you need as well, which is crucial. So, So I'll just close out. Say thank you very much for your time, and if you want to explore any of the cards, give me a shout, because I'm starting to use them in anger a bit now, and building some new ways of work with them. So if you wants to,
I look forward to typing this up also with your framework. It looks very impressive at the end. I think that requires a closer study, and perhaps itself would be easily a 30-minute call. But a big thank you from also Andrew, and thanks to everybody who participated and contributed. A lot of good things here. Once again, I filled my piece of paper with notes. So big thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day wherever you are, and enjoy the rest of your time in the UK, Andrew. Good to see you.
Thank you. I'm in Amsterdam from tomorrow, so I will be meeting with one of the